My name is Don Devereaux. It's September 2017, and I'm speaking to you from my home in Tempe, Arizona. Some 47 years ago, in 1970, when I was living and working in Santa Fe, New Mexico, I was a community organizer and an aspiring journalist at that point. I was approached one evening by 8 or 10 men from the west side of Santa Fe, from the barrio, who were heroin addicts. And they asked my help in organizing a treatment clinic, a methadone clinic in Santa Fe that they could use. They were mostly in their late 20s and 30s. These were not kids. These are guys who'd been addicted for a while and were kind of worn out of the rat race of that whole lifestyle. And one of them, in fact, was a mid-sized heroin dealer who was doing so to support a sizable habit of his. And these were guys who'd spent a lot of time in jail and in prison. Rough lives, not easy times. I was intrigued by their sincerity and their serious situation, and did some research, wrote a proposal, got funding for a nonprofit clinic which we set up, recruited a doctor, a nurse, and a pharmacist, and we were in business. The Spanish expression, the idiom, to kick the habit is quebrar el vicio. And there, at that time already, was a new methadone clinic in Albuquerque using the first part of that idiom, calling itself Quebrar. So the guys in Santa Fe decided to use the rest of it and decided to name their program El Vicio, the habit. And we got underway in 1970, the latter part of the year. The following year, 1971, I was approached by a documentary film producer named Leonard Wood and a cinematographer named Gary Young, who sought my permission and help in using this innovative program we had set up in Santa Fe as a subject for a documentary film. And I discussed it with the addicts in the program and the staff, and everybody thought it'd be kind of fun to do. You know, documentary film is heady business, and they were kind of intrigued and saw it as a way, in fact, to maybe better explain themselves to the community and broaden the local support. We did the film, ultimately, much the same way we did the program. The program was set up as a very member-focused, patient-focused operation with recovering addicts themselves on the staff, on the board, on screening panels for new applicants to join. And when we ran the film, we paired some of these guys up with camera people and sound people so they learned a little bit about the business, and even turned them loose as their own little film crews on occasion during the project, to do some man-in-the-street interviews and to talk to the police department and even themselves. So within the film there are a kind of film within a film scattered throughout it. I was approached just months ago by some folks in Santa Fe who wanted to see the film again. We showed it on PBS nationally a couple of times in 1972, a film called Run Up and Down These Streets, probably about 58 minutes long. I hadn't seen it since probably 1972 myself, so we embarked on a laborious process of trying to find a print after all these years, and it was difficult. The only print we so far have been able to find of the old 16mm film was somewhat damaged. There are probably a couple of minutes missing at the beginning, and maybe a couple more in pieces where the film was broken at later portions in the documentary. But happily, we have most of it. I'm still hopeful that maybe someplace down the pike we'll find a complete, intact print. But for the time being, this is going to have to do. We shot the film in 1971, and the following year, 1972, it was picked up and shown nationally on PBS a couple of times to apparently a receptive audience. So what you're going to see now is most of that 58-minute film, produced by Leonard Wood, and the filmmaker was Gary Young, now deceased, about 10 years ago. And the rest of us. I'm in the film. I served as a voluntary coordinator of the program for the first 2 or 3 years of its operation, just to make sure it got on the boards. And then a lot of people that were in the program. Even the one-time heroin dealer, the guy that you'll see walking down a winter street in Santa Fe talking about how as a boy he used to run up and down those streets, which we borrowed from him as the title of the film. One fact might need a little correction. In the film, you'll notice I talk about the cost of incarcerating a heroin addict, and I'm using 1970 figures of maybe several $1,000s a year. Today, it probably costs $30,000. It's much more expensive today to do that than it was back then. Happily, however, the cost of methadone has stayed very inexpensive, so the cost-benefit ratio is even better today than it was back in 1970. And for all of its problems, methadone clinics and methadone as a treatment modality still has virtue in the contemporary opiate crisis this country is facing. It's still a viable option for an awful lot of people. With that all said, watch the film. Hope you enjoy it, and see what you think.
So I started getting into drugs, and drugs gave me the feeling of, being able to handle my problems and so on, even though it was just a farce, man. I wasn't really handling my problems. I was just escaping from them. And I started getting into heavy drugs, man. I started taking codeine and shooting heroin once a week, once a month or whatever, off and on. Before I knew it, I was strung out.
Como la mira, se hacen más grupos, tú sabes, 2, 3 veces a la semana. Que están en grupos de, digamos, 8 o 10, que hablara toda la programa.
Morning. Good morning, Laura. Good morning, doctor. How are you? Tommy Savada, 90 milligrams.
90.
90, yes.
90 and Tommy? 90 and Tommy.
Right. Are you doing all right, Tommy?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you?
Mm-hmm. How about you?
That's yours, Tommy Savada. Okay.
Okay, Marcela.
Marcela Barca. She's on 50 milligrams.
50. These people are really victims of this desire to escape, and we're maintaining them on methadone so they can lead a more normal life, a square life, get a job, support their families, stay out of jail, lead a good life. I look at some of these guys and I think it's wonderful what they've done with still the same environmental difficulties. Low employment rate, low salaries, the Chicano being put down all the time. Even when he isn't actually put down, he may feel he is. Feeling of being second class, which they have to escape from. This is the psychological, the deep social side of the whole picture is the really sad side, and the side that eventually something must be done about it.
Tony Roybal.
Only for a decrease.
Decrease?
Increase, I mean.
Increase?
No, decrease, decrease.
Down, okay.
Every day. Every day.
Tony Roybal, 60 milligrams, you got him.
What is it, 60?
60.
60
Yes.
for Tony.
Tony Roybal. And you want to go down every day? Do you think you can do that, Tony? Do you really?
Well, you'll have to come and talk to a doctor.
Yeah, you'll have to discuss this with the doctor and the team. Okay? You want to talk to him, Vicky? All right. Talk to him.
Give her medicine first. Vicky's down to 15. She's almost detoxifying.
How are you?
It's a discharge, but the doctor said not to go in yet until the water breaks.
Have you gone to the doctor now? Who's going to deliver you?
Tim Vincent said Dr.
One of the staff doctors is going to deliver you? But you think you're starting labor?
No,
You don't think you're starting labor?
same
As it's been doing?
Type of drug use?
Heroin.
Off and on, steady or daily?
Daily.
Have you ever tried cold turkey?
Yes, I have.
Have you ever been in a program like this before?
No, I haven't.
You don't belong to no program right now?
No.
When did you take your last fix?
Yesterday. Well, I guess I first got addicted when I was about 16, and it lasted about 3.5 years, and then I went to prison.
And when I got out of prison, I didn't use for about 6 years, I guess. And then I moved to California and I started using about 2.5 years ago. And I'm still using now.
Why don't you show these guys your arms, por favor?
My arms aren't too marked up because I move around quite a bit. And the arm do have some marks. Not too marked up. I'm starting to heal.
El vato anda prendido.
¿Dónde es donde te estás picando ahora? Aquí es donde está duro, man. But I don't scar too easy, man. Also, yeah, and all the tattoos. That's why my marks don't show up too bad.
And what's the reason that you have for getting on the methadone program?
Well, mainly, I guess my main reason I want to get away from shooting junk and try and stop spending my money on it. That's the biggest reason. Because it seems like every time I get a hold of some money, man, all I want to do is spend it on junk. So I want to get away from that, see if I can settle down and start spending my money for other things.
Do you have a family? Do you have kids?
Well, I have kids from a first marriage, but not from this marriage, I don't.
People lose track of the fact of the humanness of the addict. He is still, unfortunately, in many people's eyes, something akin to a leper, a kind of social leper, a monster. He's stereotyped into all the worst kinds of ways. And if we haven't enough humanity somehow, and enough just plain basic common sense, to realize the ultimate wisdom of approaching the addict as a man with a problem, of working with him, not for him, but with him in an attempt to solve it, I think the ultimate responsibility then for what may or may not happen rests with the total community.
Let's refer him to Dr. Wilson.
I agree. Does everybody agree?
I make a motion that we refer him to Dr. Wilson for a physical examination, and that we accept him on the program if Dr. Wilson's examination comes through.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Okay, let's go around introducing the doctor.
They've been talking to you about the program, Richard. I just want to talk to you more. You know, what we try to do here is to change your body, every cell in it, so that it doesn't cry out for heroin.
Why methadone? Why play around with another Class A narcotic, an addicting drug? Why substitute one addicting drug for another addicting drug? Methadone is synthetic morphine. It was invented by the Germans during the Second World War. It only began to be used experimentally as an alternative to heroin addiction perhaps 6-7 years ago. And the basic reasons that it's a good choice right now are several. One, it's an oral. And one of the major health problems in being a heroin addict is secondary infection. The heroin addict has to shoot up with a needle, maybe several times a day or more, and he's apt to play around with, inevitably, some dirty needles. The oral avoids that secondary infection problem. Methadone, if you could graph it, has a very horizontal line. It peaks in a much slower and more marginal way than heroin does, which means that you don't have the euphoria problem. A guy getting properly prescribed methadone can function. That's damned important. He can at least function as a member of his community in a way that makes him almost like a diabetic getting insulin, almost indistinguishable from everybody else. Thirdly, we can prescribe methadone with a kind of accuracy, and we do medically, that is impossible with heroin. Methadone costs a few cents a day, literally a few cents a day. And so as a fourth and kind of concluding reason, methadone as an alternative at least allows us to break the economic link that forces a guy into a heavy criminal lifestyle.
I think I need the help.
And we stand together with you. You're a member of El Vicio, and we'll work together to keep you in good shape. No reason you shouldn't be a perfectly normal citizen.
Team 4, take 2.
And Joe Romero.
We're going to have to, out of these 4, roughly, yeah, we're going to have to narrow it down to two positions. How would you guys feel about Carlos working as the general production assistant, Frank working as assistant cameraman?
Yeah,
That'll be all right.
I go with it.
Would that work out?
yeah.
Okay.
They're more reliable
Okay.
than the other guys in this.
Is Costa's reliable?
Well, the most they're here now.
All right.
These other people don't even show up.
Okay.
As long as we don't give them no trucks to rent.
No trouble. All right. Okay, at the sound assistant level.
I'm an 880
sound assistant, what do you do?
Well, Gregorio Valtieta, who's right back here with the earphones on, right, is the guy who's doing the sync sound. It's all the film we shoot is shot with sound. And he's the guy who handles all the sound aspects, has to keep track of the booms and monitor the sound and keep the volume at the right level. It's a technical, highly skilled job. And Gregorio is just damn good. He's from LA, Channel 28. And whoever works with him is going to learn a hell of a lot about sound.
You guys are gonna decide what's gonna happen.
The subject matter, I guess you're referring to.
Because that's what an addict does.
What's the biggest thing we ought to be looking for in this film if we're really going to try to get something across that helps this program, and helps this kind of program?
Well, you can try to get over realistic and, you know, trying to have a shock effect on the public about what, dope addiction really is, Or you can have the hearts and flowers thing, the poor, downtrodden dope fiend. But I think it's really reaching a medium, man, in between, And that medium, I think, is basically trying to somehow get the idea across, man. It might sound silly, Get the idea across that a dope fiend or a dope addict is the guy next door, man. The guy that works at the shop, the guy that, the family man. He's just a human being.
I don't want to make it, I hope you don't either, want to make it any better or any worse than it is. And I don't want to give people a false impression either, that even though we got a lot of people trying to pull their shit together, that it's a simple thing to do. And we got people that are making it fairly well. We got people that are having a hell of a hard time. We got people that make it for a while pretty good, and then they have trouble for a while. And if we're gonna, it seems to me, do this program any good at all, we got to do what you're talking about, Frank, which is talk about addicts as human beings, and at the same time, let the public know that this kind of thing works fairly well. It's not perfect. It's got problems. Some people have a hell of a hard time. Some are, some are.
There is no answer, and I don't believe there ever will be any answer to drug addiction. But the point that we should try to emphasize is, in spite of the fact of all the faults, we are doing something in the direction of helping guys that have that problem with dope addiction.
We got about 3 or 4 guys here in the program that are off of methadone. They're not on methadone either no more, and they're doing all right. But because it helped them, that doesn't mean it's going to help the whole program,
Freckles, you have something to say.
I may want to add that where the addicts throughout their lives, they have been raised in reform schools and penitentiaries and have been, while in prison, they have been hardcore convicts, violating every kind of rule there is. And the ones that haven't done that have been habitual criminals, jumping in and out of prison, were hard to deal with. Another thing that may be added is one of the addicts goes to the penitentiary or reform school, only about 5% of them ever get a parole. That means you wind up doing 5, 6, maybe even 10 or more years in prison, just for a violation that really shouldn't call for more than 6 months in jail.
I think that prisons are really bad for an addict. That's not the answer, or for anything. Like myself, what I think was a major turning point in my life was when I was about 9 years old. I got sent to reform school for playing hooky, not going to school. Man, they could have dealt with me a lot of other ways. They sent me to reform school. I did a year in reform school. When I came out, man, I already knew a whole bunch of other things, you know. I already knew how to save backwards and how to do a lot of things, you know, that I didn't know when I was sent up there. So right away I came out and I did those things and went back up. So, you know, I got educated in prisons, you know. And if I would have been sent to maybe a home, you know, or dealt some other way, maybe my life wouldn't have been what it was.
You know, talking about the judicial system is so important because dealing out that kind of action, you know, to someone like he and I, and let's say a black, you know, it was compatible, you know, to our scene, you know, dealing out that kind of action to a judge. Like what happened in my case, you know, I'm really helping you, son. You know, someday you're going to thank me for this. I'm sending you to the reform school, you know, where you can mix with homosexuals and stomp down criminals, you know, but you're going to thank me for this when, you know, you snowball it into 2 prison terms and so on. And here comes another dude, you know, without, not my background, and a judge would say, well, man, this isn't what's happening with this guy. We'll send him to a home, you know, or we're sending him on probation to his parents. They would extend themselves, in other words, to help the guy that had a little bit more bread and a little bit more background, when actually the problem was with the people that didn't have that, and there's where they should have concentrated the help.
We need the support of the public. We need the support of the police department in order to get funded, in order to get a better, more comprehensive rehabilitation program going in Santa Fe, because the fact is that there are a lot of heroin addicts in Santa Fe, and it's not just the people in the barrios anymore. It's extending to all levels of all economic levels and social levels. So by support, that's what I mean.
Well, I see that's I have to agree with you that the addict needs a lot of help, and part of the population don't understand an addict or know what it is. And you do need a lot of support, and the police department is ready to help any worthwhile program.
Are you taking any kind of action that would lead in the direction of helping the addict, or do you just say things like this?
Well, the police department couldn't get involved in these things because we're an investigative unit. We're not teachers or things like this. We do try to console or talk to different people if they do ask us to, but we're an investigative unit, and our time is limited. But the police department is so overloaded with work, not only in the field of narcotics, but in the field of burglaries and traffic and so forth, that the department is also trying to build up their other divisions. And this is one of our main problems, that we do not have the time for this particular program. But we do get involved whenever you people ask us. We always try to manage to find somebody to go and talk to you people, or whoever requests these things. Working directly with you people or assigning somebody to your program, I don't know if that can be done or not. That would have to go through the proper channels, and this would have to be approved by the police committee and also the city council.
Just roughly, what percentage would you say on any given arrest that you hauled in, let's say 50, 60 people, what percentage would you say that this is the percentage that you've apprehended for sale of drugs? Would you say we're in it for profit, and what percentage was in it because they had to be in it because they were hooked on drugs?
Well, I have never looked at it that way, but I would say that 75% of them are to support their habit.
To support their habit. Would you say that marijuana smoking leads to heroin?
No, in a lot of instances it does, because you smoke marijuana for months and years, and your brain deteriorates, you know, and even though a lot of people say it doesn't, but it does, because...
my way of seeing the drug problem, or the reason that some of these people take drugs, is because, for one thing, some of them try to escape the hard work of living in a competitive society. That's one thing. And another thing is, a lot of them flee from the difficult problems such as character and emotion. You people are the ones involved in this program. You people have to show that you people are willing to help yourselves. And of course, the rest of the people are behind you. If you want help, you'll always find somebody to come and help you or to stand up and help you somewhere.
Would you say that a large percentage are being helped, or a small percentage are being helped, or
At this time, it probably is a 50-50 basis. But it's helping some and it's not helping others.
Okay,
it's just like any program. It helps some of them, it doesn't help others. The methadone program is just like any other program that, or any kind of, or talking about in generalities, anything helps a percentage of people, and a percentage of people is not helped. And that is something that just can't be helped.
You youngsters think that if you don't smoke grass or drop reds or take bennies, well, that you're not in the know, that you're not in the in group. Well, I can stand up here and tell you not to do it. If you want to do it, that's your bag, you know. What I am going to tell you is the consequences and the price that you'll eventually pay if you ever become an addict.
My name is Carlos Leiva. I'm 28 years old. I'm a native of Santa Fe. I've lived here most of my life. That's when I haven't been in jail, like been in Santa Fe, right? I'm an ex-addict. I would say that I'm an ex-addict because I don't believe that a person can say that he stopped using heroin and therefore he's an ex-addict. He's never going to do it again. I don't believe that's true. I believe that once you're an ex-addict, once you're an addict, you always will be. You know, the potential of you going back to using heroin will always be there, just like an alcoholic or any other thing.
Were you held there for something, I mean, like heroin? They get
Well,
you for that?
altogether, myself, I've been incarcerated approximately 25 years of my 41 years of life. Throw your life away in them places. And that's what we try to tell them. In other words, we put two pictures on the wall. What they could be if they stay away from drugs, and what they're gonna be if they don't. Probably if I'd have had somebody that was an addict or had been in trouble all his life or something, come and talk to me when I was a youngster, perhaps my life wouldn't have been what it has been, you know.
You've taken heroin, haven't you?
Yeah.
Well, exactly what do you see when you are on the trip?
You go on into a nod, you know, you coast, you know, into like a sleepy type of reverie, you know, you just coast.
It's a good feeling to be on something. Before I started using heroin, I had been on Secanol since I was about 16 or 17 years old. So I've always been on some kind of a nerve pill or something.
What made you start it?
I don't know. I used to blame my friends, friends I was hanging around with, but I don't know if it's that or it was just curiosity. I don't know.
Rudy, when your mother would go to the store and take things out of the store, did you know what was going on?
They would go out and they sell the stuff, and then they get that heroin, and they go home and they get I think they get a needle and stick it into their arm.
How many times would that happen?
Every day.
Every day?
What was she like when she was on the heroin?
They go back again.
What was your mother like?
Because she wasn't thinking right.
It's almost, I would say, you know, a religious elation, man, when he gets the impact of the so-called flash or the fix, you know. First he goes through the ritual, man, of cooking the stuff, you know, put it in a spoon and cooking it, put it in the eyedropper and tying his arm, and he builds up into this thing, you know. And it's almost like it takes on a religious aspect, you know, and then the guy fixes, you know, and then it's synonymous or like a person falling out in a religious trance, man, like these Four Square Pentecostals, man, when they reach the ultimate, man, you know, they're touched by the so-called light, man, or whatever it is that they feel, you know. And the dope fiend, man, he gets his thing when he feels that flash, you know, bang, you know, he's there, man, you know. There's no words, man, to explain, you know, what that feeling is, you know. And he goes through this thing, he's always very careful, no matter how sick he is, you know. You might see movies where the guy is shaking and all that, but he's always very cool about it, making sure that everything is right, you know, that the needle isn't clogged up, you know, and that the host is just ready, just like the mass has got to, you know, a priest prides himself in giving a good mass, you know. And this is the way a dope fiend goes about it. Maybe he doesn't know that he's doing this, you know, but if you ever observe this thing, it'll remind you of some type of religious ritual.
I don't know. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna try and stay clean up for everything, you know. I don't know what I'm gonna do.
When the doctor examined you?
Yeah.
Yesterday? You told him that you'd shot up 2 days ago.
That's right.
Okay. So do you think that interferes with the way the methadone works?
With Aviso it does.
But not with you?
Not with me, no.
Well, then you can take methadone, and when you have enough bread, you can shoot up, right?
No, not really. I had money before and I hadn't shut up.
How come 2 days ago?
I don't know, I just felt like.
You seem kind of encouraged by this program, and your brother's kind of disappointed in it, right?
Yeah, I guess he is because, well, I don't know. I didn't really know he was that disappointed in the methadone.
Well,
but we don't even have an outfit, a syringe over here, and that I think that's a lot. Because if he really wanted it, you know, he would have one here, and he doesn't.
Have you ever shot heroin?
No.
You won't know that.
Or know what?
You don't know how it is.
It's easy to start, but it's hard to stop. I try to stay off of it, but just seeing my husband use, well, I went right back.
Tony, why did you start using heroin?
When?
Why?
Why? I don't know. Can't say.
Once you did, why did you keep doing it?
I liked it. Oh, a long time ago. I was about 16 then.
What's it like?
What's it like? Takes all your troubles away. Makes you feel good. I don't know. Can't explain it.
Here. Well, each morning about, well, I leave home about 8:15, but I meet Frank's pharmacy at 8 o'clock. That's when it opens. And this is where we pick up the methadone. Frank goes in with me every morning, escorts me back to the car for obvious reasons. And then he follows closely behind me. And it's really a rush, too, because so many are waiting for me when I get there. So many of the men and women are working that they must have their methadone and get right on to their jobs. After I close up the clinic at 10:30, Doctor and I, well, then I go to the jail, because usually we always have some of our people in jail.
If the addicts themselves weren't making a concerted effort to make this program a possibility and to pull their lives together, instead of perhaps a 30-40% failure rate, we'd be operating at 100% failure rate. And I wish we could somehow convey to the community that they really should take a look at our successes and understand that without this kind of program, we wouldn't have any at all. We can't give them a rose garden. This is no utopia. But we can make a substantial dent at the symptomatic level of addiction, of heroin addiction in Santa Fe. The heroin market in a little tiny town like Santa Fe, New Mexico is perhaps $15,000 a day. And this represents a really big piece of the crime problem that everybody's so uptight about, because most of the addicts in Santa Fe are poor, and they basically have to steal to support the habit. And they have to steal at a rate of perhaps 3 to 1, which means if a guy is on a 50-day habit, he's stealing maybe $150 worth of merchandise. So it really begins to add up into the big numbers. When we talk about taking perhaps a third of the heroin market out, we've probably reduced it in 8 months from 15,000 to 10,000 a day. We probably cut damn near $1 million in stolen merchandise out of the facts of crime in the Santa Fe area. And the community has to understand that in relative terms. But we are dealing at the symptomatic level. We do have some real successes. And if they're going to blame us for the occasional failures, we haven't got a chance, because we're going to have them. We're going to have them all the time.
Tony, I'll be down tomorrow.
Why? That's a pretty hard question to answer. As to the whys. Why does a man use marijuana? Why does a man drink? Why does a man use heroin? Why does a man go hunting or fishing? You know, it's an escape. From what? I don't know. It depends on the individual.
This is one of the barrios here in Santa Fe where the drug problem most exists. And I was born and raised here as a child. I went with the environment and run up and down the streets and with kids, you know, mischief and whatnot. Then started getting into trouble. First, I was an incorrigible. By the time I was 10 years old, I found myself in reform school. Then, after doing almost 4 years there for burning down the school building, I got out. And right away, I went to the marijuana connection, the pill connections. I found all about this while I was in reform school. I was born and raised in this.
And you put those two factors together, ethnicity and low-income background, and you go into an area like the Santa Fe Model Neighborhood area, the barrio, where our program is based. And you discover that as those two factors combine, that maybe 80% or more of the total addicts in this county are coming out of one relatively small neighborhood in Santa Fe. That the barrio is producing addicts at a rate of 20 times that on a per capita basis, the rest of the city and the county. So all of these kind of societal problems, problems of racism, problems of poverty, are obviously closely related to what produces the heroin addict. Now, those factors simply tell us something about the probabilities. They still don't tell us who specifically in the barrio is going to become an addict. But we can even take that probably a step farther. Anybody who works with a group of addicts quickly becomes aware of the fact that they include among them an extra large proportion of people that are remarkably sensitive people. We have guitar players, musicians, artists, all kinds of things, poets in the Santa Fe barrio who are heroin addicts. And I would have to hypothesize, and it's just a conjecture, that in terms of the personality effects of growing up as a member of a minority group in a culture that reminds one of that all the time, and growing up in poverty, that a guy who is hypersensitive, a guy who really is a pretty sensitive guy or gal, finds that the particular kind of box that he or she is in, the kind of no-exit situation, the kind of low self-esteem consequences of living that way, makes that person much more vulnerable to saying, to hell with it, man, I'm gonna kick out, I'm gonna trip out, I'm gonna do something else, because what difference does it make anyway?
A guy asked us yesterday if we were going to get paid for it, and we told him that we were doing it on our own, and he acted like he couldn't believe that, you know.
But we think that not everything has to be done for pay.
Like, there's some things that can be done on your own, just to be to do something for the community. I mean, we don't think that you have to get paid for everything you do, man. You know, things were like that. We just hope we can do it right, man. You know. And since all of us are working, we're probably going to be able to. We're going to have to just do it on our own free time, like on the afternoons or at noon, on weekends. So we're going to dedicate it to my little brother. And this corner over here where this little wall comes out, that's where we're going to sign our names, and also dedicate it to my little brother that OD'd on heroin about last December. So.
What's your idea of a heroin addict? What do you think a heroin addict is like?
Well, these boys that's coming back from Vietnam, I think they deserve treatment because...
What about the other heroin addicts, the ones that are not coming from Vietnam, the ones that have been here for years?
We're going to have to treat those boys one way or the other, or those people. Let's don't limit it to boys, because we do know that there's a lot of girls. And I think the quicker we get onto it, the better off the nation will be.
And when you say we, who are you
I'm
speaking?
speaking of the United States.
The United States?
Oh, yes.
What do you think they're doing right now as far as treating heroin addicts?
Well, I don't know exactly what we're doing, but I'm sure there is something being done on a limited basis, if not on a larger scale.
What do you think is the cause of the problem? What do you think causes drug addiction?
You really want to know my opinion?
Yes, sir.
Especially of the boys from Vietnam. I think it's started from communists. I think...
Communism, did you say?
Yes, communists.
Because I'm just like a number of Americans. I do a lot of talking and not enough action, I guess. But I'd like to help out, I guess. I've got a lot of things going for me, too, as far as other activities. But that's no excuse. I suppose I do have some sort of obligation to the community.
I think I've got real strong feelings about it, and as far as drug use amongst teenagers and amongst grade school kids, I get extremely violent about it, and I think this is the worst possible thing that can happen. And I think the purveyors of narcotics, particularly those directed towards teenage and grade school children, should just be eliminated, period. I don't think there's any excuse for their existence.
Where do you feel the fault is of society then?
Well, I guess it's this, what is it, philosophy of permissiveness that has developed here in the last few years. And I think it's also probably, my estimation, a fact that the courts have let us down. There is really no excuse for a drug problem if the laws pertaining to narcotics were strictly enforced.
The judge has to go through the agony of determining which in his own mind and conscience are going to serve both ultimate ends, the protection of the individual and the protection of society, and sometimes they are in direct conflict. Some provision is going to have to be made if society is going to benefit from the so-called detention of individuals that have been convicted of any crime. To me, it's very simple. You've got to face the fact that when you send an individual to a penal institution, you don't lock the door and throw the key away. That individual is going to return to the community, and the community is going to have to cope with that individual. And the proper approach to me is to try and rehabilitate the individual. It can work with some, and we'll have some failures. We're dealing with the problems of human nature, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't make some attempt to deal with it. And that's the reason why I made the statement that the community approach is one that offers some hope. I know that studies that have been made, particularly with reference to juveniles as well as adults, that penal institutions, reformatories, training schools have such a poor success rate and such a high failure rate that when you commit an individual to one of those places, you in effect have given up hope as far as that particular individual is concerned.
You can't just get out of the penitentiary after 5 years and just make up for all that time that you've lost in a year or so. And I lost a lot of confidence in myself, and I felt like worthless, man, like I couldn't do it, man. So I started using drugs, man. First it was because they made me feel good, and afterwards it was because they gave me a lot of confidence. And I could get up, take my shot of heroin, I would go out, and I would rip just about everything that came into my mind. I would rip it off, man, with no trouble at all, man, you know. I went in at 19, got out at 25. Before I didn't used to think about the future. in terms of a realistic way about the future, which I am doing now. I can support myself now. I don't have to go out and steal. If things don't work out for me with El Vicio, which is where I'm employed now, I can always go somewhere else because I've got enough confidence in myself that I know I can do other things where I want to work with people. And if it's not with El Vicio, I can work with somebody else. Come up with a pretty good idea about the commercial, and then by Monday or Tuesday you can start filming it. El Wednesday se va a acabar el trabajo. El Wednesday se llegan los 10 días y se acaba el trabajo.
Cada día pueden darse una idea, luego al día de los 4 días agarran todas las ideas que se inventaron y las ponen todas juntas y es una idea, ¿no?
In other words, they neglected the kids, neglected the house porque está toda tirada. So drugs hace neglect a tu familia y todo cuando estás prendido. That's what it's supposed to say. Okay. Incarceration, 2 scenes. A guy in jail sitting down, todo aguitado, and then looking at his tracks.
23.
Okay, it has a double zipper.
You load this in the dark?
Yeah, you load it in the dark, and then you load on the Clairmat. You can load you load your raw stock. They call the raw stock your fresh roll of film that's not exposed on one side, and you do that in the dark, either in a changing bag or in a very dark room where there's no light. And then you can take it out and load the other side. You'll see him do that.
This film has given me a really good picture of the inadequacy of simply providing the medical, clinical aspects of this kind of a program. I haven't in almost a year seen as much real esprit, real coming together, real getting involved, real getting it together as a group, as I have just in the last week that the documentary filming project has been underway. I think that says a lot about the nature of documentary filming, perhaps. Filming is a pretty heady stuff, and people get very turned on around cameras, but it's worked very well. As a therapeutic group process device, it's been immensely successful. I mean, if nothing else came of this experiment of doing a film with addicts, other than the kinds of gains that they've gotten as a group in this last week, this would have been an absolutely successful project from our program's point of view. It's amazing when you begin to understand the consequences of poverty in one's life. I don't mean necessarily the lack of rice and beans on the table. I'm talking about the lack of day-to-day kinds of purpose, day-to-day kinds of communion with people in a way that has a group consequence and focus and intention. And what happens when people in a natural sort of way, not a hoped-up way, but a natural sort of way, can get together and find that purpose in their lives and work together to make it happen. Filming is a team thing. It takes camera, sound, lighting, everything to make it happen.
Every addict's dream is to belong, to fit in somewhere.
I've got an application looking for work.
With steadily increasing poor health, this addict could never hold a job.
Well, our company demands good physical fitness of all employees. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Family life is nil. While his children are hungry, the addict dreams of his next high and a better life that will never come.
Mama, we're hungry and we haven't eaten all day long.
Como eres a 3-time loser.
In his desperation for a fix, this addict committed burglary again. He now faces a life of isolation. Death doesn't make any sense, but neither does an addict's life. How can one belong in the world of drugs? No one can.
We can approach the heroin addict any one of 3 ways. We can ignore him and leave him on the streets and accept the fact somehow, very cynically, that his life is down the tubes. And that's going to cost us. The social cost just for ignoring this guy is going to be around $30,000 a year. That's what he's ripping off this town just to support his misery. About $30,000 a year on the average. So if we do nothing, we pay for it. We pay at the level of $30,000. Second option, we can try to bust him. We can say heroin addicts are criminals. And we can try to put them away in a state penitentiary. If we do that, it costs us around $6,000 a year, just to maintain the man, not to count police costs and court costs and everything else. Just to maintain this man in a state penitentiary is around $6,000 a year. And I might add $6,000 with practically no possibility of rehabilitation. Even if he does withdraw, detoxify, cold turkey while he's in the pen, the chances are something better than 95% when he comes out again. He's going to be back on heroin and back in the same lifestyle that he started with. So the penitentiary option costs $6,000 with perhaps less than 5% success rate, if you will, in terms of what it means to anybody. It's not a rehabilitation effort at all. It's a retribution effort, no more, no less. The third option that we have as a community is to look upon the heroin addict basically as a man with a, for better or worse, a serious medical problem, and attempt to provide some help to him as an outpatient in the community where he lives to work that problem through. That costs around $1,200 a year. Tiny fraction of what it costs to either ignore the man or to try to put him in jail. And if we can demonstrate a rehabilitation success rate of 50% for $1,200 a year, working with this man as a human being and not as a criminal, I think we're all better off. I think the community's better off, and God knows the addict is better off. He has a chance at that point to be recognized as a human being, which, goddammit, he is.